queens to commoners and fighters to scientists, get to know the most famous French women who changed the course of history. It's no secret that women have played a major role in history, but they often don't get their dues when it comes to recognizing their achievements. So it is all in the more incredible to note these famous French women whose names are instantly recognizable years, decades, and even centuries after their deaths. These fascinating female figures lived in France and have been instrumental in everything from politics and art to literature and science. So let's get to the top French women who changed history, shall we? Bonjour, je m'appelle Swagatika. I'll be presenting French women who changed history in the guidance of Professor Amitabh Kumar. Was gradually decreasing in influence due to the increasing Frankish invasions, a Germanic tribe. At the time lived an ordinary woman from Nanterre called Genevieve who saw God and became a nun at 15. She would slowly become renowned for her piety and her visions. In 451 AD, the city was threatened by the army of Attila the Hun, which had pillaged Treves, Metz, and Reims. Parisians were planning to abandon the city, but they were persuaded to resist by Genevieve, who led a prayer marathon to divert the Hun army. When the Huns diverted to Olo instead, Genevieve was proclaimed a heroine. During subsequent attacks and sieges, it was Genevieve who would negotiate between the armies, looking out for the people of Paris. She would go on to counsel Clovis I, the first king of France, to convert to Christianity and make Paris his base. Canonized after her death, Saint Genevieve is even today considered the protectress of Paris. The Pantheon in Paris was originally intended to be a temple dedicated to her, while the Pantheon ended up being converted into a tribute for the great thinkers and visionaries of France. There is a church dedicated to her in Paris. There are statues of her in several locations around Paris, including one in the city's town hall. Marie Antoinette. When Austrian Princess Marie Antoinette married the future French King Louis XVI, France was slowly going bankrupt. She entered the chateau of Versailles at its height of elegance as a mere teenager. However, the 16-year-old Marie Antoinette was desperately homesick. Adding to her misery, her husband took 7 years to consummate the marriage and give her a child. While she amused herself throwing parties and entertainment as best she could, King Louis XVI was spending a lot of money helping the American revolutionaries fight their mutual arch-enemy, the English. It would not end well, as the people blamed him and his foreign spendthrift wife for the ills of the country. To pay for it all, he tried to impose even more taxes on the poor to raise money. The French king and queen Marie Antoinette were taken from Versailles when the monarchy was overthrown during the French Revolution and eventually beheaded at Place de la Concorde in Paris in 1793. Marie de Medicis. France owes some of its great cultural gems to this Queen of France, who was an important patron of art and architecture. Marie de Medicis had spectacular taste. She even commissioned a series, which is now the Louvre, by Peter Paul Rubens, to adorn her grand Luxembourg Palace. Marie de Medicis introduced contemporary Italian painters to Paris and influenced the trajectory of art history, particularly as it pertains to portraits. Olympe de Gouges. This highly political and admirable French playwright/activist was an outspoken advocate for improving the conditions of slaves in colonies. Stubborn in her conviction that women should hold the same rights as men, she wrote to influence the text Declaration of the Rights of Women and the Female Citizen. Despite being executed along with many of her contemporaries during the Reign of Terror for attacking the government, the coup was an integral figure in the progress of human rights. Marie Lachapelle. Considered the mother of modern obstetrics, Marie Lachapelle revolutionized childbirth. She invented new methods of delivery that saved both the mother and the baby. Learning midwifery from her mother, Lachapelle was delivering babies by herself by age 12. She became the head of obstetrics at Hôtel Dieu and later the director of midwifery school La Maternité. Thanks to the extensive notes on the 40,000 babies she delivered during her lifetime, she was able to write a 3-volume treatise about how to properly deliver babies. Anne de Bretagne. The year was 1491 and the 100 Years' War had barely ended when there was a highly eligible 14-year-old bride entered the royal marriage motte. Brittany had a new duchess, Anne de Bretagne, the French word for Brittany. She and her lands were so coveted that she was promptly betrothed to a number of dukes and princes. The poor girl fortunately didn't have to marry all those men because the King of France, Charles VIII, and his army insisted that she marry him instead. In order to save the city of Rennes, which was under siege, she acquiesced, and thus the Duchy of Brittany became part of France. Her husband, King Charles VIII, would not last long forever. None of their children would survive the childhood either, and when the king died in 1498, the throne went to his cousin, King Louis XII. Following an agreement made to secure the annexation of Brittany by France, Anne had to marry the new king, making her twice the Queen of France. Throughout her reign, she fought for the rights of Britons, as its citizens were called. To this day, Brittany considers itself a separate entity, paying her tribute. Charlotte Corday. Charlotte Corday was a young author and activist during the French Revolution. but it is for a murder that her name is long remembered in the French history books. Jean-Paul Marat was a journalist and a radical politician during the Revolution, known for advocating some of the worst massacres during the Reign of Terror. Through his newspaper, he was already an icon because of his debilitating skin condition that required him to spend much of his day in a medicinal bath. Charlotte Corday was a member of an opposing revolutionary group, the Quixotons, who represented a more moderate approach to the revolution. She became skeptical about the direction the revolution was taking and the reign of terror that was being unleashed across France. She would purchase a knife in the hotbed of opposition that was then the Palais Écarlate and sneak into Marat's bathroom while he was in the bath to stab him. They both became martyrs of revolution, and Corday herself was executed in less than 4 days on 17th July 1793. At only 24 years old, her act transformed the idea of what a woman was capable of, at a time when women were not widely represented amongst the revolutionaries. Elaine Stadler, often called the French Cinderella, Elaine Stadler was a nun of the Congregation of the Daughters of Charity of Saint Vincent de Paul de Metz, and member of the French Resistance. She was recognized for having organized the flight of more than 2,000 soldiers from under the German Reich during World War II to the Free Zone, including future French President François Mitterrand. She was arrested in 1941 and spent some time in prison before resuming her escape route network for refugees. She died in November 1944 during the fighting that liberated Metz. She was posthumously awarded the National Order of the Legion Honor and Croix de Guerre with palms.
Toutes les personnes pieuses que je voyais, ou comme les prêtres à qui je parlais, il était différent.
Simone de Beauvoir, French author and feminist Simone de Beauvoir became famous for her writings on both feminist theory and feminist existentialism. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. France would grant women the right to vote during her lifetime in 1946 due to the advocacy work of writers and philosophers like her. Among her most famous books was the 1949 treatise The Second Sex, a detailed analysis of women's oppression and contemporary feminism, as well as the coming of age. She would win France's top prize for writers, the Prix Goncourt, in 1954. Living with her partner, Jean-Paul Sartre, a famous writer of his own account, the two would advocate extensively for women, the working class, and neglected minority groups. Her sister, Hélène de Beauvoir, was also a famous painter focusing on female issues. Coco Chanel. After World War I, people wanted to let loose. The roaring 1920s would see corsets being banished and complicated dresses pushed to the back of the closet. In 1926, Gabrielle Coco Chanel, a French couturier, published a picture of a short, simple black dress in American Vogue. It was gap-length and straight, and a revolution in terms of women's clothing. The simple design made it accessible for women of all social classes while still being chic and attractive. The legend of the little black dress and Coco Chanel was born. During the German occupation of France during World War II, Chanel was suspected of too close to the German occupiers while living at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. After the war, she was not charged as a collaborator due to an intervention by British President Winston Churchill. She died at 87 while still living at the Ritz Hotel. She had been in the process of preparing her spring catalogue. George Sand. George Sand was a French novelist and essayist who scandalized the public when she began to wear male clothing and smoke in public. Rebellious in her male dress, Sand was able to circulate Paris freely, which gave her increased access to venues that banned women. The political entrepreneur founded her own socialist newspaper and wrote many novels which argued in favor of women's equality. Sand is famous for declaring, "You can bind my body, tie my hands, govern my actions. You are the strongest, and society adds to your power. But with my will, sir, you can do nothing." Mahi Mahvin. A Violet Mahi Mahvin was instrumental in the creation of aeromedical evacuations. Her first attempt to create an air ambulance in 1909 was thwarted, but she didn't give up. She promoted them from 30 years and helped organize the first International Congress on Medical Aviation. Once airplane ambulances were in use, Mafhin established the first medical air service in Morocco and became the first certified flight nurse. Her work inspired hundreds of women to become pilots for l'Aviation Sanitaire, a group of air ambulances. Also, in 1915, she became the first woman in the world to fly combat missions when she flew bombing missions over German-held territory as a volunteer pilot. Au revoir, à la prochaine.